I'm looking at this whole graph curve here, and I'm going to go start with this first one here. I'm going to go to frame 10. And if you were to select it in the graph editor, you can see what the tangent looks like. Linear tangent will follow the curve. It'll follow to the next keyframe. It'll make a bend here. If I were to go and select that curve, right click, tangents, and let's make it flat. And let's just see what happens when it's flat. Now making it flat will pull the following curve up. And what that essentially does is it gives it a natural ease in. And I'm just going to make that tangent all flat there. So what it'll do is it'll ease in to that move, but it's still kind of coming to an abrupt stop here. So I'm going to go to frame 15, and now I can do this in timeline as well. I can select the frame in the timeline, and I can go tangents, flat. And you see what it does here? It'll flatten that and actually make a bend in the curve there. So what we've got going on here is a little bit of a ease in and an ease out. Now it's holding here for a little bit, and it's going to ease into the next move. So I'm going to go to frame 20. I can either do it in the graph editor, but if I do it in just this curve here, it's just going to change the tangent for that one curve. The other curves are not going to have the flat tangent like I did before. If I go down into the graph editor or into the timeline, I can go tangents, flat, and it'll change all the curves. But you don't really necessarily have to pay attention to that right now. Let's just see here. So now what I can do now is I can play with, if I grab the curve handle like I just did here, and I'm going to do that again so you can see, is I select the keyframe in the graph editor, and then I select, I'm going to make this bigger so you can see, and then I select just one side of the handle, just drag and select, and if I middle mouse drag it, I can move the handle in my graph editor like so. I can do the same thing on the other side. So what this basically does is just gives a little bit of an ease, so it doesn't come to a complete stop like so. So let's take a look and see how that works in our timeline. So as I'm scrolling through here, the ball is moving, it's just moving ever so slightly, and then it eases into the next move. Let's go to the other end. Let's go to our graph editor, and we're going to look at the ending curve here. And I'm going to go first to frame 50, and I'm going to select that keyframe there, and I'm going to make it tangents flat. Okay. And then I'm going to go to the last keyframe, frame 60, and again I'm going to make that tangents flat. So it's going to come to an ease out there. Now I can also mess around with the curve here. So I can weight sort of the ease out a little towards the end or more towards the beginning, like so. I can also do the same thing on the ending curve, where it's going to ease out, overshoot, and bounce back, depending on how fancy you want to get with that. So play around with your tangent handles, or you can just just make them flat or linear and see what they do. I'm just going to keep that one flat for now. Okay, so let's take a look at our motion here. So we have a anticipation, move, overshoots, and recoil. Great, I'm happy with that for now. Now I want to do the tail. So basically what's going to happen is when the ball moves, the tail's going to react. Okay, the tail's going to move according to how the ball is moving, and it's going to have some overlapping action. Each one of these is going to move in a different pace. So what I want to do is I want to select all three of these shapes here, all three of these cones. And if I were to rotate them with all three selected, you can see how it has kind of a neat little way of moving. It has a nice curve to it. It's doing a nice little move that I'm kind of liking. So let's put it back at 0. I'm going to go to frame 1, and with all three of my cones selected, I'm going to press S. And it's going to hold for 10 frames. Press S. Remember that my default tangents are going to be linear for now. Okay, so now it's going to have some anticipation. So it's going to go to frame 5, frame 15, excuse me. And I'm going to just move it a little bit. I have to be careful, and I'm just going to move it a little bit and keyframe them. All right, see how that's moving and how that tail is reacting. But now, notice that it's stopping and the tail is sort of staying in that position. We want to move it back, so I'm going to move it to 20, and I'm going to move it back into the other direction. It's kind of swinging back. Okay, so it goes here and it reacts. It's a little less than that. And now the ball is going to start to take off. So I'm going to go to about frame 30, and the tail, look how the tail is going to react. I'm going to go to frame 40 and move it a little more because that ball's really taken off there. Go to frame 50. Let's actually go to frame 48, right before it stops. I'm going to keyframe it. And then I'm going to go to frame like 55. And I'm going to bring it the other way because the ball is going into the opposite direction. Okay, and it's going to go to frame 60. Let's just keyframe it there. And now the ball, the tail, is going to swing back in the other direction, compensating for the ball stopping. And then it's going to swing back. Let's go to frame 70, not quite as far as it was before. Let's move up a little bit. Let's move it to frame, 85. Let's make it to frame 90. And then we're going to move it to frame 75. Move it back a little bit. Let's go to frame 79. And we're going to move it back the other direction, not quite as far as before. Let's go to frame 82 or so. You can experiment with the frames here. And they're going to swing back. Go 3 frames to 85. Swing back. Let's go 2 frames. Just a little bit. 2 frames. Almost settled, and then straight down at frame 90. Now let's take a look and see how that's all moving. Okay, it's a little stiff right now, but it's looking pretty good. It's got some nice little animation here. I'm going to stop this, and in the timeline I'm going to click and drag all of those keyframes, and I'm going to go to tangents, and I'm going to make them spline. Let's see what happens with spline. Now if you notice with the spline, there's a little bit of motion when it's supposed to be still. And what that is that the spline automatically puts a curve. Let's take a look in the graph editor. And that's a rotate Y. See how when I did the spline, it did a little bit of a, it just put a little bit of a curve there. So I'm going to just go to frame 10 with all three of those selected, and I'm going to make that tangent flat. And now that'll steady that little tail there. And let's deselect it, and let's play the animation and see what we've got. And there you have it. You have a nice little ball with animation. I suggest and I encourage you to try out different things, try out the different tools, try out different tangent handles in your graph editor and see what they do. Thank you for watching.